Miniature painting is often sold to us as an easily accessible and fun little desk hobby where you can just pick a miniature, grab a brush and some paints, and then you are all set to go, right? Well, if you've been into the hobby for as long as I have, or even if you are brand new, I'm sure you've found out the hard way that this is often not the case. Especially if you've just started miniature painting as a hobby, you've probably picked a miniature that you're excited to paint and then found yourself instantly overwhelmed by choice and having to make a lot of confusing and potentially expensive decisions concerning what to do next and where to spend your hard-earned cash. Which brushes are the best? What size of brush should I be using? Which paint brand is the most pigmented? What does pigmented even mean? And do I need a wet palette? So if you've also found yourself spoiled for choice but somewhat lacking in guidance, then this video is for you, because I'm going to show you everything which I use in my weekly painting rotation as someone who's been painting consistently for over a decade now. And from brushes and paints to glue and everything else you'll need to assemble and paint your miniatures, I'll show you which hobby items I think are worth spending money on, and some where you can get the same or even better results for a little bit less. Whoosh. Let's go. So like I just said, this video is going to be all about what my personal painting and hobby material recommendations are. And I want to make it clear that I haven't tried every single paintbrush or paint on the market, because there are a lot on the market, but I have tried a lot and I have painted a lot. So I just wanted to make this video about my own personal experiences about what works for me. And for that reason, I have no doubt that I will either recommend something that you maybe don't like or completely miss something that you absolutely swear by. So as usual, please feel free to use the comment section below as an open forum to discuss or recommend your own favorite hobby items so we can all benefit from this video even more. Additionally, I want to assure you guys that this video is in no way intended to push products or promote items or anything like that. However, as always, for the sake of clarity, if I am affiliated with a brand or if I got any of the items I'm showing you on screen for free, I will be sure to let you know. Also, basically none of the things apart from maybe the glue and the craft knife share anything in common with the items in my day-to-day Gundam building and customizing kit. And if you'd like a video where I introduce you guys to the things I like to use for that hobby, then please let me know as well, and I will make a separate video all about those. But without further ado, let's begin with what I think are the two most important things you'll need in this hobby: paints and brushes. The very first thing I did when I started painting Warhammer is buy a load of paints, and to this day I still buy a load of paints in my constant quest to find my favourite colours and brands. I've tried Vallejo, P3, Citadel, Pro Acryl, Army Painter, War Colours, Turbo Dork, Two Thin Coats. There's more. I can't remember the other ones. I've tried a lot of paints. And honestly, I don't think that a single one of these ranges are straight up bad, which is really good for us as a consumer. But this video is about my own recommendations and experiences, so let's take a little look at what my desk looks like on an average painting day. Right now, I'm painting up the new Gundam Assemble miniatures, some colourful Underworlds goblins, and a little bit of Trench Crusade too. And as you can see, apart from a couple of outliers here and there, my paints of choice are mostly Citadel colour and Pro Acryl. I don't know if Citadel paints have kind of become a comfort range for me because they were the first ones I used, and when I worked as a painting presenter for Games Workshop, I kind of had to use them, so now I'm used to them, but genuinely, I really like them. Now, I have to admit that not all of the colours and paints are the best in the Citadel range, and some of them are honestly not that great when compared to others on the market, especially paints like the whites, blacks, and the metallics. And if you are interested interested in a more detailed analysis of which exact Citadel colors I do recommend above others, then I've made several tier lists that cover in detail every paint type Games Workshop produces and which of the paints in each category I think are the best and the worst. And I will pop a link to all those lists in the video's notes so you can check them out and maybe save yourself picking up a not so good pot of paint. But yes, for Citadel, I find that despite the questionable pot and not dropper bottle design, a lot of the paints in the range do exactly what I want them to, and they have a great color selection to pick from as well. And especially if you're into speed painting or you want to add a little punch to your paint jobs with some glazes, I cannot recommend the contrast paint range highly enough. I use them in pretty much all of my paint jobs and I think they are absolutely fantastic. But let's move on to my newer paint range crush, which is Pro Acryl. When people ask for my paint range recommendations these days, Pro Acryl is definitely my top one because their paints are just stunning. And yes, this is the first brand where I am definitely affiliated with them because I have my own little range of colourful Pro Acryl paints. But trust me when I say that this collaboration was an absolute dream come true for me because I was already genuinely a massive fan of their paints. For a little insight into how these paints feel and work, they're in these little twist top dropper bottles and they kind of come pre-thinned, making them perfect whether or not you are using a wet palette. But the best thing about these paints is their pigmentation and their finish. These are some of the highest pigment paints I have ever used, which means that they cover really well without the need to build up in a bunch of layers, potentially muddying the finish of your miniature. I think the Bold Titanium White in their range is the white paint I have seen the most people recommend because it's thin and smooth and it completely covers over black in just one layer, which if you're new to the hobby is something which is highly sought after. So if you do get just one paint from this range, I really recommend that you pick up the Bold Titanium White and also maybe the Ultramarine paint from my signature series because it is so blue that it actually looks like an optical illusion, and I just think that more people should see that for themselves in real life. Other paints which I tend to use on the side most often are some of the fluorescence and metallic paints from Vallejo and quite a bit of P3, especially their lighter colors because I find them to be really nice and very silky to use. Also, as an aside, if you're looking for some very punchy and pigmented fluorescent paints, then I actually recommend you use these acrylic pen refills from Molotow. The formula is super thin and it takes a little bit of getting used to, but the color payoff is great, they are true fluorescents, and they mix with other paints really well as well. Next up is brushes, and just like with paints, I think us as consumers and hobbyists are a little bit spoiled for choice in this category, so buckle up because this is going to be a long section. Similarly to the vast array of paint ranges I've also used a phenomenal amount of brush types in my time from various different makers and brands. But whilst paint tends to stay kind of within the same range as far as price goes, sometimes these brushes can get quite pricey. I used to be a big Winsor Newton Series 7 fan when I first started seriously getting back into miniature painting because they were always recommended to me by very good painters on the internet. And I still quite like them to this day. They're good quality brushes with very nice tips, and if you take care of them, they can last years. But they are very expensive, and occasionally you can find yourself buying a dud brush where the tip splits super easily, and for a whopping £19 a pop, that can get a little bit frustrating. But I still like them, and I think I would still recommend picking one up and giving it a go. Most of the time they're really good, and I've painted some pretty great miniatures with them in the past. However, if we go back to my uncurated, average weekday painting desk, you'll see that I definitely do have a favourite brand these days, which is the Artist Opus brushes. If you've watched any of my painting videos in the past, then you'll notice me pretty much always using a little white Artist Opus brush no matter the size of my project. And that's because I think they're really good, and also they're easily available at my local hobby store. The price point as well I think is pretty reasonable too. They're a little bit cheaper than the Winsor Newton Series 7s, and they are very much cheaper than the Artificer range from Games Workshop. They come in various sizes, but my go-tos are the zeros and the triple zeros, but they all hold an incredibly good point, so I often find that I can do my smaller detail work with a zero without even needing to reach for a stupidly small size like the triple zero. But since I haven't even come close to trying every single brush from every single brush range, I thought it was only fair to ask the wider community what their opinions were. When I asked you guys what your hobby paintbrush brand of choice was, there were a few clear winners. Winsor Newton Series 7s came in first place with 683 votes, then Artis Opus in second place with 590, followed by Rosemary & Co. with 492, and finally Raphael 8404s with 332 votes. Since the Rosemary & Co. brushes came in so highly recommended, and with a lot of people saying that they share the same manufacturer with Artis Opus, but the brushes are much cheaper, I picked up some for myself, and whilst I haven't used them yet, they look good quality and I am excited to see the results. And for good measure, some of the other brush companies which were highly recommended in my DMs were Orange Brushes, Tesseract Miniature Brushes, and the brushes from Monument Hobbies. So there's some recommendations for you by the painting people for the painting people. If, however, you're looking for something a little bit more on the cheaper side, which is still pretty good, then actually the straight up Citadel small layer brush isn't that bad. Really? I usually avoid recommending Citadel brushes in general, especially the Artificer range, which I don't think is good quality for how much you are paying for it at all. But the classic small size Citadel brush is pretty good, it holds a tip well, is cheap, and is what I used on all of my Citadel masterclass videos quite happily. However, I do recommend that you buy these brushes in person and check out the brush before you buy it, because sometimes Citadel brushes can come a little bit split, but if you do get a good one, then it can serve you really well for not that much money. If you're looking for a vegan alternative, or you just don't fancy licking the butt hairs of a squirrel every time you paint, then Games Workshop do have a range of synthetic brushes, which unfortunately are just kind of okay. For some reason, there's not a huge market for synthetic miniature painting brushes out there that I know of, and a lot of the time when you're using synthetic brushes, they have an issue where they stain super easily, and also the point at the end tends to curl up a bit when they dry, making it harder to do some of the fine detail work you're used to with other brushes. But if anyone does have any recommendations for either vegan or synthetic brushes that they really like, then please put them in the comments section below, because I would love to try them. But what about when you're not painting something tiny and detailed? Well, often when I'm painting something a little bit bigger or messier, you'll see me using these kind of blue brushes with the orange tip at the end, and I'm pleased to say that these ones especially are super cheap, maybe the cheapest. A lot of the time when you're doing a bigger project like terrain or some larger bases, or scrubbing the ancient paint job off an old miniature like I'm doing here, you'll want to steer clear of using your nice brushes. So I buy a couple of these packs of very cheap brushes from Amazon, which are like £5 for a pack of 20. And they are honestly just fine and perfect for larger or messier projects, and they keep your good brushes safe from the Stirland mud pot as well. And as for dry brushing, you may have heard a rumor that makeup brushes are absolutely perfect, and I'm pleased to say that this is completely true. Makeup brushes can get expensive, so just make sure you're not buying the high-end ones. Again, most online stores will have sets of like 7 different sizes for £10 and under, which will give you these big ones that are perfect for dry brushing terrain, buildings, or tanks, and some smaller ones which are just perfect for your troops. One thing that I do recommend though, whatever type of brush you choose to use, is a good brush cleaner, and the go-to one that I see basically every miniature painter use is this one here. year. Keeping your brushes in good condition is the #1 thing which will save you money when buying brushes, trust me, and a good quality brush, if well kept, can last you years and years. This cleaner is great for getting all of the crud off your brushes, and it also conditions the bristles too, so it stays nice and silky and the point stays pretty as well, and it just seems to last forever, so I cannot recommend this product highly enough. A palette is going to be something which is necessary for you to have on hand no matter what paints or brushes you choose to use, because you're always going to need somewhere to keep, mix and use your paints as you're painting. But your palette can essentially be whatever you like, as long as it's slippery and hard and you don't mind it being covered in paint. Phrasing. Glass palettes have become popular recently, and I've also seen a lot of people using those cheap rubber fidget popper toys as palettes, and I think that that's really cool and innovative, and they look like they work really well too, for not a lot of money. However, if you're new, you're gonna hear a lot of people saying like you need to use a wet palette, and don't worry because that is just not true at all. Whilst I am an avid wet palette user myself, and I do recommend one for various reasons, some of the best painters I know, including members of Games Workshop's heavy metal team, do not use them, and you can get great results without one, so I don't think they're necessarily necessary. I personally just find them useful, and they make my paints last a bit longer and stay a little bit thinner whilst I'm painting, which I find super useful, especially when it's a hot day like it's been every day this summer. The one that I personally have used the most and most consistently over the last 5 years is the Army Painter wet palette. It looks really nice, and you even get this tray where you can store all your brushes, but I tend to just put those to the side instantly to use the main component, which is nothing fancy. It's just a plain black tray with a foam inlay and some specially sized palette paper too. But it's convenient, it works, and I really like the size of it. The foam inlays last a really long time and are easily cleanable, and also the packs of hydro paper are very generous too, with 50 sheets in a pack. And even though I use them nearly every day, I only find myself running out about 2 or 3 times a year, if that. If you are wet palette curious, then you can also make one yourself super easily for practically nothing at all, with things that you probably have lying around your house right now. Start by grabbing an old plastic tray. I'm using one, somewhat ironically, from the Army Painter wet palette packaging, but the lids from takeaway boxes work great for this as well. Then add some folded up or cut up kitchen towel to it, and then dampen it up with some water, then cut up some baking paper to size and pop it on top. Et voila! You have a perfectly good DIY wet palette, which works super well too. And if you don't believe me that this works, then take a look at the wet palette I used in Citadel Masterclass, because it is exactly this. And if it's good enough for me and Games Workshop's paywall, then I'm sure it's good enough for you too. Next up are the spray primers that you'll need to prime your miniature, and this is a really important step because if it goes wrong, it can ruin your miniature and also your entire day. Trust me. And my favorite primers, which are currently on the market that I recommend, are the primers from ColorForge. Again, for clarity, this is another brand that I am affiliated with because I do have my own absolutely stunning ColorForge spray called Rogue Pink. So I guess some people are gonna think that I'm biased or something, and I suppose that's fair enough, but genuinely the matte black primer and also the Tabletop Tactics white primer are the primers I use the most of. And I absolutely swear that even if I wasn't affiliated with ColorForge in any way, I would still be buying their primers all the time because they are very, very good. ColorForge's formula is great, but they also have an amazingly vast range of colors to pick from too. And recently I went kinda ham mixing and matching all these sprays together to create a bunch of different effects, and it looked awesome, like with this instant synthwave effect that I got using the pink and the blue spray, and I kinda wanna make a whole video on how I get these effects done, but anyways. But saying all this about ColorForge, I also have to say that I'm not against against using good old-fashioned Citadel primer either. I've used them all, but especially Chaos Black for years with very little trouble, and their new formula for their whites are so much better, especially their Corax White and their Grey Seer. As a quick hint though, when you're using any spray primer, it's a good habit to warm the can up a little bit before you spray to give you the best possible chance at a nice even coat. I usually let my can sit in some warm water for a few minutes, but not hot or boiling water. Please God, do not boil your cans of primer. And then after it's warmed up a little bit, I shake the hell out of the can before I use it. And I find that this method tends to prevent the claggy, thick, or even grainy priming sessions that I dread and that are always just the worst. Now that we've covered painting, let's move on to the tools that you'll use to assemble and build your miniatures. And first of all, you're gonna need some clippers. For years and years, I used all of the various iterations of Games Workshop's clippers, from the old metal ones to the newer black plastic ones. And now, in hindsight, I think it has to be said that you can do a little bit better for your money. In the last year or so, I've been getting more and more into building Gundam. And of course, when I started, I went and bought the most expensive Gundam clippers money could buy, the £50 coveted God Hand clippers. And yes, they are really, really good clippers. They cut through plastic like butter and leave nothing behind, and they are so fine and accurate that the plastic needs basically no cleanup afterwards to make it look good. However, after I posted my video of me playing around with them on some Games Workshop plastic sprues, I got absolutely slated in the comments section, because apparently they are not designed for plastic as thick as Games Workshop's and are quite susceptible to breaking under this amount of stress. So yeah, do not do this, I suppose. However, I'm glad to say that my God Hands are still in one piece, but just as a backup, I took a bunch of people's recommendations and bought some significantly cheaper Steady brand clippers for my everyday hobby needs. These Steady clippers use the same single blade technology as the God Hand clippers do, but for around half the price, and I have to say that I have been really enjoying using them. They're not quite as buttery smooth and accurate as the God Hands were, but they are leaps better than any Games Workshop clippers I've ever used, so these are what I've been using lately to clip all my miniatures off of their sprues. And as for the craft knife that you'll need to remove mold lines and things like that, I honestly just buy them off the internet really cheap. I don't even think the ones I buy have a brand, they just come with a nice rubbery, grippy handle and a bunch of replacement blades, and they do me just fine. I guess if you are particularly afraid of losing a finger or something like that, then you could use a Citadel mold line remover, but yeah, a plain and simple craft knife is absolutely fine for most of your projects. I really don't think you need anything especially expensive for this part of your hobby. Isn't exactly the most exciting thing that you'll need to buy in this hobby, but there are a few things which I really recommend that you have on your painting desk. Firstly is the Tamiya Extra Thin Cement, which comes in this little green bottle. This is my favorite go-to plastic glue, which will essentially just melt your miniature parts together, creating the most secure bond possible. You do have to be a little bit careful with this stuff though, because it is very thin and watery, and it does melt plastic, so if it goes anywhere you don't want it to and then you stick your finger in it when you're moving your mini around, it's not going to be pretty. But it works the best out of any other plastic glue I've used, and the bottle lasts forever too. But I honestly don't use plastic glue for everything. In fact, often I just resort to good old-fashioned super glue, and again, I just use this brand off the internet because it's cheap and it works. But I do, however, highly recommend buying some super glue activator if you do want to use super glue more often. I've been asked a few times in several videos what the spray I'm using with my super glue is, and it's just an activator. It's essentially an aerosol spray which speeds up the bonding time for super glue up to basically nothing, meaning that it sets straight away after just one scoosh. This is great for small fiddly parts or larger heavy limbs or weapons, and I rarely use my super glue without it. It is, however, quite potent though, so make sure you open up a door or a window before giving it a go. Apart Apart from a comfy chair, a desk, and a good strong light to paint by, that's essentially everything I would recommend you pick up to start or continue your miniature painting journey on the right step. Of course, there is a bunch of other things that I think are really useful to have, but I just don't have the time in this video to go into them in detail, so I'm gonna go into them really fast instead. For painting racks or holders for your paints, you don't need to spend a bunch of money on anything custom made if you don't want to, because the nail art industry has you covered. In my old studio, these wall-mounted paint racks were just acrylic nail polish holders, and now I use these ones with nice wooden planks, which are also listed as nail varnish holders on Amazon, and they're really cheap and they fit most miniature paint ranges extremely well. As someone who works with metal miniatures a lot and who also regularly pins things to other things, I absolutely love this electric drill. I use it all of the time, and whilst it was a little pricier, it works incredibly well, and it comes with various drill bits which are the perfect size for most of your mini hobby projects. And also it saves me getting the insane wrist cramp that I used to get when I would hand drill the barrels on 100 orc boys in one night. No fun. I use a painting handle or a miniature holder for pretty much all of my projects, and whilst there's a bunch on the market in a bunch of wacky and various shapes and sizes, I've always found myself using the Citadel ones the most. Maybe it's habit again, but I like them, they fit my hand well, and I can swivel them around really easily to get to where I want to on the miniature. Careful though, because the Citadel ones can get a little bit top heavy depending on what you're painting, so I recommend taking your miniature off its little handle and then putting it somewhere overnight so you don't accidentally find it knocked over in the morning. If you're into sculpting and green stuffing, then my favorite sculpting tools are these ones with the silicone heads and also these ones with the hard metal heads. Between the two and a couple of toothpicks and needles here and there for some finer, pokier detail work, I don't really find myself wanting much more. And again, you can find them all online for very cheap. And with that, I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. And as always, thank you for being rogues. I will see you in the next one. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.